Alan Fenstermaker here with another Pro Wrestling Archives back on the road. I'm here with Rick Smooth here, and how are you doing today, Rick?
I'm good, man. I'm just trying to talk a little bit about pro wrestling, man. I was thinking about this earlier. I was watching this Jim Cornette documentary that he did when he went over to England, and it's like this weird British rock documentary. I was pushing it by getting this one, you know what I mean? But it was cheap.
Yeah, no, Jim Cornette's got a lot of wisdom that he shares. I tune into his podcast that he puts up online all the time, and dude, I remember the one day he put one of them up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, already had several thousand views. So yeah, Jim Cornette's obviously doing something right.
Yeah, the guy's a genius, man. So I wanted to talk about some of my favorite guys that sometimes are given their props and sometimes are overlooked. I wanted to talk about Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig. Some people say that he's the greatest wrestler of all time, and I think he's somebody that does get his props, but maybe never won the WWF World title, but was a former AWA World Champion and WWF Intercontinental Champion, and he's held the US title and WCW and done a lot of shit. But some people would argue and say that Curt Hennig is the greatest professional wrestler of all time, and I would say that he's definitely my favorite professional wrestler of all time.
Yeah, he is. I remember he even had a run recently too, back in the early 2000s, late 90s. I remember.
Yeah, he came back. Yeah, I remember that. He came back to WWF, and there's actually a really cool match on YouTube that I saw with Curt Hennig defeating Brock Lesnar.
Yeah,
and they had that infamous fight on the airplane too, where Curt Hennig took down Brock Lesnar at 40,000 feet in the air, and everybody on the plane was panicking. The plane ride from hell.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that and all too, and Scott Hall was involved in that too, and I know so after that a bunch of guys from WWE were released. I know Scott Hall was among them.
Was he? I heard Flair was a little wild on that too. But yeah, so Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, I remember seeing the match at SummerSlam '91. It was him versus Bret Hart for the Intercontinental title, and Curt Hennig passed the torch to Bret Hart, who was coming out of a tag team, the Hart Foundation run, and Bret Hart was coming into his own. He won the Intercontinental title in Madison Square Garden that day. And I was rooting for Curt, all day, but he passed the torch. He had a back injury, so they gave the title to Bret. But Curt wrestled one of the best matches ever that night with a messed up back. And then what ended up happening was Bret Hart's career took off, and he became a superstar.
Yeah, no, when I think of Bret Hart, my favorite match with him, I could think about is the Montreal Screwjob. That was a pretty interesting thing. There was a lot of controversy among it too. You got Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart, and then Vince McMahon screwed Bret out of the title, and then that was in my opinion, when all that happened, that was the start of the Attitude Era, when Vince McMahon was coming across as a character where he was actually hold on for a second, Rick. If you want to take this, I gotta step out for a second.
No problem. I'll say my opinion about the Montreal Screwjob. I think that was actually one of those moments in wrestling that if we could take back, we should. And the way that I would have taken it back is I remember Goldust was getting over in '96 pretty big, and him and Mick Foley, Mankind, were potential main eventers in late '96 around Mind Games and shit like that. What I would have done differently if I was the WWF around, let's say the Montreal Screwjob era, was I would have put the belt on Goldust, and then from there figured it out how to get it to Austin for WrestleMania or whatever. Because what happened with Shawn and Bret, was a huge turning point in wrestling, and I guess people at the WWF would be like, no, that it ended up being one of the I guess, best things for the WWF as far as business, because Vince ended up, Vince got real hot, DX got hot, and then Austin got even hotter, and then The Rock came in. So, I mean, it's one of those moments where it's just one of those weird twists of fate, but you know, it all might have been able to be avoided if, you know, they could have put the strap on Goldust, you know, whose lineage, you know what I mean? I mean, he's Dusty Rhodes' kid. He could definitely have won the world title, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the whole, yeah, like, that was pretty interesting, the whole Montreal Screwjob thing, because, like I was going to say, like, before I had to dip out for a second, that's back when, the whole thing started with Vince McMahon getting involved in the storyline, screwing Bret Hart,
Yeah, Mr. McMahon, yep.
And then later Vince McMahon, or Mr. McMahon, like, that's when he screwed, next thing you know, he was screwing Austin, and then, like, put the title around the waist of The Rock, and then, started the whole corporation angle and everything, and then, that's, in my opinion, the Montreal Screwjob, that's, when things started getting good in wrestling, because it started going from, wrestling as a sport to more, sports entertainment, where they were, showing a whole different side of it, and, taking it in a whole different direction that not many people have seen.
Well, I mean, me and you might have different opinions on that, but that's okay, man. That's why we do these podcasts, man, is we can both speak our opinions and, you know, agree to disagree at times, but at the same time, we'll let the fans choose what they think.
Yeah.
But, okay, so with that being said, now I wanted to talk about my favorite tag team of all time. And I'm going to give you two tag teams, but the first one I'm going to give you, without a doubt, my favorite tag team of all time, Demolition, managed by Mr. Fuji.
Nice.
And, you know, this was a really interesting thing, because I remember back then, you know, in 87, 88, 89, 90, and, yeah, I remember it real clear, actually. Demolition was just tearing through teams, and they were heels, and then they became faces because the fans just liked what they did. It wasn't that they were, you know, trying to make them faces. The fans decided that, and they ended up having a pretty good run. I thought maybe their run could have went a little longer, but for some reason they brought in Crush, and then next thing you know, they were done. And I remember seeing Smash at a couple house shows, or maybe one house show in Philly at the old Spectrum, where he was wrestling as a singles match, and then he came back as Repo Man.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah, I remember Repo Man. He had an interesting gimmick. He was pretty cool.
And I remember, too, because the Road Warriors were real hot, you know, in NWA at that time. And I remember liking Demolition better, but then people would say that they're a ripoff of, you know, the Road Warriors. But I never really, I mean, I could see it with the face paint, but then there was other guys, too, like Powers of Pain and stuff like that. I think Demolition truly did stand on their own, and whatever they were doing with the outfits or whatever, and just the face paint and the mask coming in, and then with Fuji with him, I mean, you know, he's one of the legends of pro wrestling. I mean, really taking it back. He's from the old school, the real old school, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, there was just something about Demolition that was just, I was always a Smash guy. I always liked Smash better than Axe, but together they were doing, you know, pretty good team. And I remember them doing that decapitation move, which I thought was a really good tag maneuver at that time.
Yeah, no doubt, yeah. I know, one of my favorite tag teams, I think about tag teams in WWE, or actually WWF back then, I know the New Age Outlaws,
there you go.
The Road Dogg, Jesse James, Badass Billy Gunn, part of DX. Those guys were an amazing tag team. And then also another team I like too is Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett.
Wow, I forgot about that team.
Yeah, because this was right before Owen's untimely death and all. Yeah, it was pretty cool. They had a good run and everything, and Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett, they had this chemistry together too, where where they actually looked like a tag team, and and just seeing them with the belts, it was it cemented in me. Those guys are the perfect examples of old school wrestling in the coming into the new school era.
That's really interesting, man. And I'll mention something about both of them because the New Age Outlaws, when they got together, that was one of those chemistries that I would have never saw coming because I remember the roadie with Jeff Jarrett, who was the Road Dogg, and then I remember Billy Gunn being with the Smoking Guns. And, Billy Gunn's obviously a tag team wrestler, and Road Dogg comes from the Armstrong family of wrestling, so, he could do pretty much anything. But seeing them come together was very unexpected and very cool. Now, with Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett, those two guys are two of the best technical wrestlers out there. So to put them in the same ring together on the same team, that worked out really well. Now, I'll bring up another team, too, that I think is probably one of the greatest tag teams that's ever done it, but that doesn't get nearly enough credit, is the Eliminators from ECW. I'll never forget watching that first ECW pay-per-view, Barely Legal, and the Eliminators come on and destroy the Dudley Boyz. The Dudley Boyz don't even get off one move. The Eliminators are just hitting all these crazy spots. It was just one of the best displays of tag team wrestling I had ever seen, especially with new innovative moves. Those moves are still fresh today. 23 years later.
Yeah, I know. Like one of my favorite tag teams that you just mentioned, the Dudley Boyz. Those guys, I remember watching them back in ECW and all. Like Bubba Ray with his stuttering gimmick, and then you brought back in Big Dick Dudley, Big Daddy Dudley, and then you got like chubby motherfucking Dudley, and and then you got Spike Dudley, the whole Dudley family, and then like you had Devon and Bubba
Sign
Ray.
Guy.
What's that again?
Sign Guy Dudley, and then Devon from the south side of Dudleyville.
Yeah, and then they came from the ECW into WWE, and then like that was around the time that the ECW guys started invading WWE, and then like the fans didn't really know what to make of them. The fans would like boo Bubba Ray with his stuttering gimmick and all, and like I know like The Rock had some classic promos against Bubba Ray and his stuttering and all too, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And then like
you got to mention Joel Gertner too when you're talking about the Dudley Boyz, man. Joel, it's so big, it's hard from Gertner.
Yeah.
But also too, when the Dudley Boyz came to WWF or WWE at that time, whatever it was called, I remember like they were doing that gimmick with Bubba Ray where he would put somebody through a table and then he would like give this real menacing kind of like catonic kind of stare. And I really liked that, actually, because he didn't do that in ECW.
Yeah, like when he put Trish Stratus to a table, I remember that.
Yeah, I love Trish Stratus. She is so fine. But so another thing too that Bubba Ray used to do was at the ECW arena, he would come out and he would call out anybody in the crowd, and that was like in the 90s when they were doing that reality wrestling kind of thing, where he was ready to fight anybody in the crowd. It was not an angle or a shoot or a work. It was a shoot. And he would come out, and we
actually, right now.
Yeah, we would be talking shit in the crowd, and like I remember my dad would get all up in Bubba Ray's, yelling all kinds of shit, and when Bubba Ray came around, we realized real quick that Bubba Ray was ready to fight. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, like Bubba Ray was not playing around back then.
Yeah, no, he wasn't.
he was he was legitimate with all that.
Yeah, and then like and then as things started progressing and all in the tag team division, like you got Edge and Christian, the Hardys, and then like one of my favorite things that you think about tag teams is like the triple threat tag team matchup, tables, ladders, and chairs. You had the Dudley Boyz, Edge and Christian, and the Hardy Boys.
I would say that match got all three of those tag teams completely over too.
Yeah, because you figure the Hardy Boys, like those guys, like actually came up in backyard wrestling and all too. Like I know, like Jeff Hardy, like I remember I started.
Were they from North Carolina or something?
Yeah, they're from North Carolina, Cameron, North Carolina. I remember like when I first started watching, like back in the Attitude Era. One thing that actually got me like got me really into it was after watching the Hardys, dude. I remember watching Matt and Jeff Hardy coming out there and like doing their high flying stuff and everything, and I know, like,
those guys were crazy.
I know, like, I'll admit that I'm not saying I endorse it anyway, or, like, I know, like, because backyard gets a lot of bad stigma and all, but, I know, like, I did my share of backyard wrestling, and I know, like, I did, like, do some stuff like Jeff Hardy did. Like, I know I did a couple swantons onto a trampoline myself.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I think, like, growing up back then, I mean, something that happens is you just beat the shit out of your friends with wrestling moves. So, I mean, I think everybody at one time has done some backyard, man. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I remember when Lita got with the Hardy Boys, too. She was in ECW as Miss Congeniality, and she was so fucking fine back then. And then she went up to WWE and really got over as a performer and a real serious worker. And that was another one of those ECW, glory stories of, somebody kind of making it out of ECW and out of Philadelphia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I remember watching Lita as Miss Congeniality in ECW, and then when she came.
Yep, with Danny Dorian and Roadkill.
Yeah, when she first came into WWE, WWF, she came in with S.A. Rios, and then like yeah, like it was like whatever. Like I didn't know what to make of her or anything with that gimmick. But then it really took off. Like when Lita was with the Hardy Boys and
wow, I forgot about that.
And then Lita and Matt and Jeff Hardy formed Team Extreme.
Wow.
And then,
yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I remember like Lita was with S.A. Rios when she first came in, and then.
I remember that. Yeah. Wow.
And then.
So with Danny Dorian and Roadkill, too, at the very end of their ECW run, they had gotten over so strong, and I remember the whole play. Like, anywhere Roadkill went, he was over.
Yeah.
And that was their time, man. They had their moment, man, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think if there's anybody else I want to make mention of because we've covered a lot of ground really fast. Is there any workers from the late 80s, 90s that you want to bring up? For some reason, the Texas Tornado just popped into my head. Kerry Von Erich.
Okay.
I remember seeing him in the WWF, and I know that he was past his prime at that time because I'm pretty sure he actually had a fake foot at that time. He had some kind of injury where he was going around with he's wrestling with one foot. Yeah,
it kind of reminds me like in the new era of wrestling and all too. Like back in the early 2000s, Zach Gowen, with the kid with the one leg. Like I know, like he made it in the Indies pretty good. Like what he would do is I remember he first had his came out as when Hogan was Mr. America, and then he came out along with them as a big Mr. America Hogan fan, and then he ended up was hiding underneath the ring or something like that, and then they just whoever was looking for him under the ring grabbed his leg. And they were like, whoa, and then he just popped out with one leg and just started flying all over the place. And, I know it was crazy because Zach Gowen, for having one leg, he had matches with Brock Lesnar, too, back then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something that just popped into my head was some of those old Survivor Series matches with those really cool, remember on the VHS tapes how they would have, all the different teams on the the front and the back of the VHS tapes?
Yeah.
I really liked how they would display them and the artwork that they made for them. It was always really interesting to see the synergy between the different workers and the blend of how they would go together.
Yeah.
I think in my head right now, I'm thinking about either Survivor Series 90 or 91. I could see the Texas Tornado and Tugboat and Demolition and a couple guys. I hope I'm getting all these names right on the video, but I could be mistaken. But I'm just getting these flashes in my head about Survivor Series in the early 90s.
Yeah, hold on, I gotta get going.
And the Rumble too.
Yeah, I gotta get going.
The Rumble had that really cool artwork.
We gotta wrap things up, so.
All right, cool. Well, hey, everybody that's out there listening, thank you guys for listening to Back on the Road. And that's Alan. This is Rick. We will be doing more of these.
All right. Thanks for tuning in.